He came home from work, dropped his bag by the door, walked into the living room like he did every single day of his life, and screamed. Not a yell, not a shout, a full, guttural, wounded animal scream. Because sitting on his precious display shelf, in a place of honor usually reserved for his favorite hand-painted centurion, was a headless action figure holding another figure's severed leg like a trophy. I was sitting on the couch 2 feet away, eating cereal, watching it happen. Sorry, I said. Didn't realize we weren't allowed in our own living room. That was the moment I knew. 3 months of hell were finally, deliciously, being repaid. If you've ever lived with someone who thought their name was on the lease and everyone else's wasn't, someone who took a shared space and made it theirs while you just existed in the leftover corners, this story is for you. Stick around, because this isn't a story about a fight. It's a story about a quiet, meticulous, 3-month campaign of psychological warfare fought entirely with plastic soldiers and superglue. Smash that like button, subscribe if you love a good, slow burn payback story, and let's get into it. Let me set the scene, because context is everything here. I was 34. Old enough to know better. Apparently not old enough to stop myself from what I eventually did. My 3 housemates were younger. Bill, 22, laid back to the point of being almost horizontal. Jess, 24, sharp-tongued and quick to notice injustice long before I did. And then there was Ted, 23 years old. And Ted had a hobby. Now, hobbies are fine. Hobbies are healthy. I want to be very clear before this story goes any further. Nobody was ever angry that Ted built models. Painting miniatures, assembling kits, losing yourself in something with your hands. Genuinely, good for him. That was never the problem. The problem was where he did it. And more specifically, where he kept them. When we first moved in together, the 4 of us split rent evenly. Same amount, every month, no exceptions, no special arrangements. On paper, that meant we all had equal claim to every shared space in that house. The kitchen, the hallway, and the living room. The one room in the house actually designed for people to sit down, relax, and exist together. Ted had other plans for it. It started small, the way these things always do. A shelf here, a display case there. Just until I clear out my room a bit, he said. We believed him, because why wouldn't we? We were friends. That's the whole reason we decided to live together in the first place. We liked each other, we trusted each other, we thought this was going to be easy. Within 2 months, that living room did not belong to us anymore. Shelves lined every wall. Display cases ate up the floor space where a coffee table used to sit. Half-built kits and drying paint jobs colonized what used to be our couch cushions. There was no space left to sit. There was barely space left to stand. The television. The one we all chipped in to buy together, sat dark and untouched for weeks at a time, blocked by a diorama of some battlefield scene that took up the entire space in front of it. We started avoiding our own living room. Think about how insane that sentence is. We paid to live there, all 4 of us, equally. And 3 of us had quietly, gradually, been squeezed out of the one communal space in the house. Not through any single dramatic moment, but through a slow, creeping occupation we somehow let happen because none of us wanted to be the one who made it a thing. Eventually, it became impossible to keep pretending everything was fine. We called a house meeting, all of us sitting. Well, 3 of us sitting. Ted perched awkwardly on the one sliver of couch, not currently occupied by plastic soldiers, and we laid it out as calmly and as reasonably as we could. Ted, we need the living room back. We're not saying stop your hobby. We're saying share the space. He nodded. He apologized. He said he'd sort it out that weekend. The weekend came and went. Nothing changed. We called another meeting. Same nodding. Same apologies. Same absolutely nothing happening afterward. Here's the part that made it so maddening. Ted wasn't cruel about it. He wasn't sneering at us or mocking our complaints. If anything, that would have almost been easier to deal with, because at least then it would have felt like a fight we could actually have. Instead, it was this soft, passive, almost dreamy indifference. Like the request simply didn't register as something that applied to him. Like the rest of us were background characters in a house that, in his head, he already owned. And that's the feeling I want you to really sit with for a second, because I think almost everyone listening to this has felt some version of it. That specific, simmering frustration of being technically equal to someone. Same rent, same lease, same rights, while being treated as though your presence is an inconvenience they're tolerating. It's not the kind of thing you can point to and say, look, right there, that's the injustice. It's death by 1,000 small moments. A closed door here. an unanswered request there, a shrug instead of an apology. By the third house meeting that went absolutely nowhere, something in me had quietly, permanently shifted. I remember the exact night it happened. I'd come home late, tired, wanting nothing more than to collapse in front of the TV for 20 minutes before bed. I walked into the living room and just stood there in the doorway for a second, staring at the wall-to-wall diorama setup, the total absence of anywhere to sit, the television screen glowing uselessly behind a scene of tiny plastic soldiers locked in eternal, silent combat. And I laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind of laugh that comes right before you do something you probably shouldn't. Because here's the thing about Ted's models that I'd clocked weeks earlier, filed away, and was now finally ready to use. They weren't just displayed. They were curated. Every figure had its place. Every accessory sat exactly where it belonged. Heads matched torsos, matched legs, matched paint schemes, matched factions. To Ted, disorder in that display wasn't just untidy. It was a violation, a wrongness he could feel in his teeth. I didn't yell. I didn't confront him. I didn't even tell Bill or Jess what I was about to do. I just walked over to the shelf, picked up two figures from opposing armies, and swapped their heads. VHE Revenge, Page A as N. The next morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee when I heard it. WHO. A pause. Footsteps. WHO Waz N here? Ted stood in the living room doorway, holding two mismatched figures, one in each hand, staring at them like they'd personally betrayed him. His face had gone this deep, blotchy red. His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I didn't even look up from my coffee. We're not allowed in our own living room? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out except a strangled, frustrated noise, and then he stormed back into the room, muttering to himself, frantically trying to fix a swap that had taken me all of 8 seconds to perform. That should have been satisfying enough to stop there. It was not enough. Not even close. Over the following weeks, I turned model tampering into a genuine art form. I'd swap a figure from one battle scene into the middle of an entirely unrelated diorama, like some tiny plastic soldier had wandered into the wrong war entirely. I'd rearrange entire formations so his carefully staged battle now looked like everyone had turned around and started fighting their own side. I mixed factions. I staged tiny, absurd scenarios. A knight standing awkwardly among a squad of World War II infantry, like he'd taken a very wrong turn through time. And every single time, Ted lost it. Not once did he build up any tolerance. If anything, it got worse with repetition, because now he was starting to feel it even when nothing had actually been touched. Walking in, scanning the shelves with genuine paranoia, looking for what might have changed today. Who's doing this? He'd demand, to the room, to the air, to anyone who happened to be nearby. We're not allowed in our own living room? I'd repeat, every single time, in exactly the same flat tone. It became less of an excuse and more of a taunt disguised as a technicality. And he knew it, and he couldn't do a single thing about it, because I was right. We did live there. We did pay the same rent. He had no actual grounds to tell any of us to stay out of a shared space. VHE Revenge, Pace TWO. VHE Masterstroke. But here's where it stopped being simple mischief and became something closer to a genuine psychological operation. One afternoon, while Ted was at work, I very carefully, very deliberately removed several of his most prized, most fastidiously built models from the shelf. I didn't damage them. I didn't even touch the paint job. I just wrapped them up gently, hid them safely in the back of my closet, completely unharmed, because this was never about destroying anything he loved. It was about the feeling of losing control over something he thought was untouchable. Then I went out and bought the exact same kits, brand new, from the same hobby store he used. I built them badly, deliberately, gloriously badly. Wrong heads on wrong bodies. Paint smeared in places it had no business being. Pieces attached at angles that would have made Ted's soul leave his body if he'd been present to witness the crime in real time. And then I put them back on the shelf, in exactly the spots where his real ones used to sit. When he got home and saw them, the reaction wasn't anger this time. It was something closer to grief. Genuine, wounded, almost tearful confusion, like he was staring at the mangled remains of something he'd loved. What? What happened? Who did this? These are ruined. I let him sit in that panic for a moment. Just a moment, long enough for it to really land. Then I calmly pulled out the receipt, the box, the packaging, still folded neatly in my room. I bought these, I told him, completely deadpan. Had no idea where yours went. Weird. The look on his face in that exact second, somewhere between relief that his real ones might still exist somewhere, and complete bewilderment at how any of this was happening to him, was, I will admit, one of the most quietly satisfying things I have ever witnessed in a shared house. I let him stew in that confusion for the rest of the evening. And then, later that night, while he was in his room, I swapped the badly built decoys back out and returned his real, untouched, perfectly preserved models to the shelf. Exactly where they belonged. Like nothing had ever happened. He never knew that part. Not for a long time, anyway. By the time I eventually moved out, months later, on completely unrelated terms, the living room had, slowly, quietly, without another single house meeting, become usable again. Not because Ted had some big emotional breakthrough about shared space and mutual respect, simply because the psychological cost of holding that territory had become too exhausting for him to keep paying. He never fully caught on that it was always me. Suspicion floated around, sure, but I played dumb with a straight face every single time, and honestly, at this point, so did the models themselves, silent, unbothered, blissfully unaware of the chaos they'd caused on my behalf. The real payoff came after I'd already left. Bill and Jess told me, weeks later, that they'd picked up right where I left off. The swapping, the rearranging, the quiet campaign of tiny plastic anarchy. It didn't stop when I walked out the door. It became a house tradition. A shared, unspoken understanding among the people who actually deserved a say in that living room. Was it petty? Completely. Was it childish? Absolutely. No argument there. But sometimes the small, absurd forms of justice are the only ones actually available to you. You can't take someone to court over a diorama, and you definitely can't win a fair fight against someone who genuinely doesn't register that they're doing anything wrong. Sometimes all you've got is a little chaos, a straight face, and the quiet satisfaction of watching someone finally feel, just for a moment, as powerless in that space as they'd made you feel for months. If this story made you laugh, or if it reminded you of your own housemate horror story, drop it in the comments. I guarantee you're not the only one with a tale like this. Smash that like button if you believe in a little petty justice every now and then. Subscribe for more stories exactly like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.